My daughter-in-law said, "Don't ever go to my mother's house." The words cut through me like shards of broken glass. One night, desperation made me break that rule. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. The morning light filtered through my cramped Brooklyn apartment windows like a reluctant visitor. I was 72 years old, standing in my kitchen wearing the same faded blue bathrobe I'd owned for 15 years. My hands trembled slightly as I poured lukewarm coffee into a chipped mug, the kind of trembling that comes not from age, but from years of carrying burdens too heavy for one person's shoulders. The smell of stale cigarettes from the apartment downstairs mixed with the scent of my neighbor's cooking, creating an atmosphere that felt suffocating. This was my world now. 4 walls that witnessed my daily routine of quiet desperation. Wake up. Check my phone for messages that never came. Make coffee. Stare out the window at the bustling street below, watching other people live lives that seemed so much fuller than mine. That particular morning, my phone buzzed. A text message from my daughter-in-law, Rebecca. My heart jumped with hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today I'd be included in something. Anything. Sunday dinner at our place, 4 p.m. Just the immediate family. Just the immediate family. Those words stung like salt in an open wound. Wasn't I immediate family? I was Michael's mother, for God's sake. I'd raised that boy from nothing, sacrificed everything to give him a good life. But somehow, in Rebecca's world, I existed on the periphery of my own family. I dressed carefully that Sunday, choosing my best sweater, the navy blue one with pearl buttons that my late husband Robert had loved. I even put on lipstick, something I rarely did anymore. Hope does funny things to us. It makes us believe that this time will be different. The subway ride to their house in Queens felt eternal. I clutched my purse tightly. Inside it, a small gift for my granddaughter Emma. A book of fairy tales I'd found at the local thrift shop. The pages were slightly yellowed, but the illustrations were beautiful. I imagined reading it to her, her little head nestled against my shoulder. But when I arrived at their brownstone, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Rebecca answered the door wearing a smile that never reached her eyes. "Margaret," she said, not Mom or even Grandma Margaret like she used to call me. Just Margaret. "Come in, but I need to tell you something first." She pulled me aside, away from where Michael and Emma were watching television. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but the words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Don't ever go to my mother's house. Promise me. There are complications there. Family issues you wouldn't understand." I nodded, confused and hurt. What kind of warning was this? Why would I even want to go to her mother's house? But the intensity in her eyes, the way her fingers gripped my arm, it felt like a threat disguised as concern. Dinner was a performance. We all played our roles perfectly. Michael talked about his job at the accounting firm, his voice mechanical, avoiding eye contact with me. Emma showed me her drawings, but Rebecca quickly redirected her attention elsewhere. I felt like a stranger at my own son's table. The conversations flowed around me, never including me. They discussed vacation plans I wasn't invited to, school events I wouldn't attend, family decisions made without my input. I sat there cutting my pot roast into smaller and smaller pieces, swallowing both food and humiliation in equal measure. When I offered to help with dishes, Rebecca waved me away. "We've got it handled." When I suggested having Emma over for a sleepover sometime, Michael changed the subject. Every attempt at connection was met with polite deflection. I left that night feeling smaller than when I'd arrived. The subway ride home was a blur of fluorescent lights and the faces of strangers who seemed to have somewhere to belong. I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment, each step heavier than the last. That night, lying in my narrow bed, Rebecca's warning echoed in my mind. Don't ever go to my mother's house. What was she hiding? Why the secrecy? The more I thought about it, the more curious I became. but curiosity mixed with hurt has a way of fermenting into something dangerous. For weeks, I replayed that dinner in my mind. The forced smiles, the stilted conversations, the feeling of being tolerated rather than welcomed. This wasn't how family was supposed to work. I thought about Robert, my husband of 43 years, and how he would have handled this situation. He always knew what to say, how to smooth over rough edges. But Robert had been gone for 8 years now, leaving me to navigate these treacherous family waters alone. I began to examine my relationship with my son and his family more critically. When had things started to change? When had I become the outsider looking in? Maybe it was when Rebecca and Michael moved to that bigger house in Queens, funded partially by a loan I'd given them from my savings. Or maybe it was when Emma was born, and suddenly Rebecca's mother became the preferred grandmother. The memories came flooding back, all the times I'd been excluded, dismissed, or forgotten. The birthday party where I found out through Emma's innocent chatter that there had been a family celebration I wasn't invited to. The Christmas morning when I sat alone in my apartment while they opened presents I'd bought, but wasn't there to see unwrapped. The phone calls that went straight to voicemail. The text messages left unread. I started keeping a journal, writing down every slight, every disappointment, every moment when I felt like I was begging for scraps of affection from my own family. The pages filled quickly with entries written in my careful handwriting, each one a small testament to my growing isolation. My neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, noticed my declining spirits. She was a widow, too, a few years younger than me, with warm brown eyes and an endless supply of homemade empanadas. We'd known each other for over a decade, sharing the occasional cup of coffee and complaints about the building's heating system. "Margaret," she said one afternoon as we collected our mail from the lobby, "you look like someone stole your sunshine. What's going on with that family of yours?" I found myself pouring out my heart to her, telling her about the Sunday dinners that felt like interrogations, the grandchild I barely saw, the daughter-in-law who treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own son's life. Mrs. Garcia listened with the kind of attention that had become foreign to me, genuine, caring, without judgment. "Mija," she said, using the Spanish endearment she'd started calling me years ago. "Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest, but that doesn't mean you have to keep letting them." Her words planted a seed in my mind, but I wasn't ready for it to grow yet. I was still caught in that dangerous space between hope and despair, still believing that if I just tried harder, gave more, asked for less, things would get better. The financial strain was becoming impossible to ignore. For years, I'd been Michael and Rebecca's secret bank. When they needed a down payment for their house, I liquidated part of my retirement fund. When Rebecca's catering business struggled during the pandemic, I sent them monthly checks to help with the mortgage. When Emma needed private tutoring, I covered the costs without being asked. My own checking account had dwindled to almost nothing, but I told myself it was worth it. Family takes care of family, right? That's what Robert always said. That's what I believed. But as I sat at my kitchen table one evening, looking at another overdue notice for my own bills, I began to wonder if I was the only one in this family who understood that philosophy. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday in November. I was having lunch at the diner down the street, my weekly treat to myself, a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup that reminded me of childhood, when I overheard a conversation at the booth behind me. "She just keeps inserting herself into everything," a woman's voice was saying. "Michael's mom, she's so needy, so desperate for attention. It's exhausting." My blood turned to ice. I knew that voice. It was Rebecca. "I mean, I try to be patient with her," Rebecca continued, "but she just doesn't get it. We have our own lives, our own family dynamics. She wants to be involved in everything. And it's just too much." The woman she was talking to, I couldn't see her face, made sympathetic noises. "Maybe you need to set firmer boundaries." "Oh, I have," Rebecca said, and I could hear the smugness in her voice. "I told her not to go to my mother's house. There's nothing there she needs to see anyway. My mom has her own issues. The last thing I need is Margaret stirring up drama. I sat frozen in my booth, the grilled cheese turning to cardboard in my mouth. They were talking about me like I was a problem to be managed, a burden to be endured. The humiliation burned through me like acid. I paid my check with shaking hands and walked home in a daze. The November wind cut through my thin coat, but it wasn't half as cold as the realization that my own family saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. That night, I called Michael. For once, he actually answered. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Do you want me in your life? In Emma's life? Because sometimes I feel like I'm just bothering everyone." There was a pause, a long, telling pause. "Of course we want you in our lives, Mom. Your family. It's just, you know how things are. Rebecca has a lot on her plate with work and Emma's school and everything. Sometimes it's just easier to keep things simple." Simple. That word hit me like a slap. I was a complication, a problem to be simplified away. "I understand," I lied. "I'll try to give you all more space." "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand." But I didn't understand. I didn't understand how the woman who had worked 3 jobs to pay for his college tuition had become someone who needed to be managed. I didn't understand how the grandmother who babysat Emma for free whenever they needed it had become too much trouble to include in family dinners. I didn't understand how love had become this one-sided transaction where I gave and gave and gave, and they took and took and took. The weeks passed in a blur of loneliness and self-doubt. Thanksgiving came and went without an invitation. I spent it alone with a frozen dinner and old photographs, trying to remember when things had been different. Christmas was approaching, and I dreaded it. Another year of buying gifts for people who saw me as an obligation. But then, in mid-December, something happened that changed everything. I was walking back from the grocery store, my arms full of bags, when I saw Rebecca coming out of a building I didn't recognize. She was with an older woman I'd never met. Thin, well-dressed, with silver hair styled in an expensive cut. They were laughing about something, looking relaxed and happy in a way I never saw Rebecca look around me. I ducked into a doorway, not wanting to be seen, and watched as they embraced goodbye. The older woman got into a taxi, and Rebecca walked in the opposite direction, toward the subway station. My curiosity was piqued. Who was this woman? Why had they looked so comfortable together? A terrible thought crept into my mind. Was this Rebecca's mother? The one I was forbidden to visit? I followed Rebecca's path backward, trying to see which building she'd come from. It was a nice brownstone in a good neighborhood, with flower boxes in the windows and a well-maintained front stoop. Nothing about it suggested the complications or family issues Rebecca had mentioned. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Rebecca and that woman, laughing together like old friends, kept playing in my mind. I thought about all the times Rebecca had been cold to me, all the times she'd made me feel unwelcome, and here she was, having what looked like a delightful afternoon with someone else's mother. The unfairness of it ate at me. Why was her own mother, if that's who the woman was, worthy of laughter and affection, while I was treated like a burden? What made her so special and me so dispensable? I started taking walks in that neighborhood, telling myself I was just exploring a new area of the city. But really, I was hoping to see them again, to understand what I was missing. What was the secret that made their relationship work when mine with Rebecca was such a disaster? On my 3rd visit to the area, I got lucky. I saw the silver-haired woman going into the same brownstone, alone this time. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone dealing with pain or illness. As she fumbled with her keys, I noticed her hands shaking. An idea formed in my mind. A terrible, necessary idea. I waited until the next Tuesday, when I knew Michael and Rebecca would both be at work and Emma would be at school. I dressed carefully, not too fancy, not too casual. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in that neighborhood. I took the subway to Queens and walked the familiar route to the brownstone. My heart was pounding as I climbed the front steps. What was I doing? This was crazy. Rebecca had specifically told me not to come here. But the need to understand, to see what was being hidden from me, was stronger than my fear of consequences. I knocked on the door. The woman who answered was the same one I'd seen with Rebecca. But she looked different now. Tired. Worried. Her silver hair was uncombed, and she was wearing a bathrobe at 2 p.m. "Yes," she said, her voice cautious. "I'm Margaret," I said. "Michael's mother, Rebecca's mother-in-law." Her expression changed immediately. Surprise, then something that looked almost like relief. "Oh," she said. "Oh my goodness. I'm Elena. Please come in. I've heard so much about you." But as I stepped into her house, I realized immediately that something was very wrong. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the comfortable smell of a lived-in home, but something antiseptic and sad. The living room was beautiful. Expensive furniture, tasteful decorations, fresh flowers. But it felt staged, like a showroom rather than a place where people actually lived. Elena led me to the kitchen, moving carefully, one hand trailing along the wall for support. "Forgive me," she said. "I'm having a difficult day. Some days are better than others." As we sat at her kitchen table, she poured tea from an elegant china set. Her hands shook as she lifted the teapot, and I noticed bruising on her wrists, the kind that comes from gripping things too tightly or being gripped too tightly by someone else. "You said you've heard about me," I said carefully. "From Rebecca?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "Oh yes, Rebecca talks about you often, about how demanding you are, how you don't understand boundaries, how you're always trying to interfere in their lives." The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. "Is that what she says?" "She says a lot of things," Elena replied, her voice growing quieter. "She says you're jealous of our relationship, that you can't stand not being the center of attention. She says you're financially irresponsible and always asking them for money." I nearly choked on my tea. "Asking them for money? I've never asked them for a penny. If anything, I've been sending them money for years." Elena's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" And so I told her. About the house down payment, the business loans, the tutoring fees, the countless smaller amounts I'd sent whenever they claimed to be struggling. About the retirement fund I'd depleted to help them achieve the comfortable life they now lived. Elena listened in stunned silence. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, staring into her teacup. "Margaret," she said finally, "I think we both have been lied to." Over the next hour, Elena told me her story. She wasn't Rebecca's mother. She was Rebecca's former employer and mentor, a successful businesswoman who had taken Rebecca under her wing years ago. Elena was battling early-stage dementia, and Rebecca had gradually insinuated herself into Elena's life, claiming to be helping with household management and medical appointments. But Elena was beginning to suspect that Rebecca was taking advantage of her confusion and vulnerability. Money had begun disappearing from Elena's accounts. Bills were going unpaid while Rebecca claimed to be handling Elena's finances. Elena's own daughter lived across the country and only visited occasionally, leaving Elena dependent on Rebecca's kindness. "She told me her mother-in-law was a problem," Elena said, "always causing drama, always wanting money. She said you were trying to break up her marriage and turn Michael against her. I felt sorry for her, having to deal with such a difficult family situation." The picture became clearer and more horrifying with every revelation. Rebecca had been playing us against each other, using Elena's illness and my desperate need for family connection to manipulate both of us. She'd portrayed me to Elena as a greedy troublemaker, while describing Elena to me as a family complication that needed to be avoided. But why? What was Rebecca getting out of this elaborate deception? The answer came when Elena showed me to her study. The room was filled with expensive art, antique furniture, and what looked like financial documents scattered across an antique desk. Elena had been a very successful stock market investor, building a vast fortune over decades of careful planning. Even in her confused state, I could see evidence of significant wealth: stocks, certificates, bank statements showing balances with more zeros than I could count, and even documentation of cryptocurrency investments, including Bitcoin holdings. "Rebecca helps me manage all this now," Elena said, gesturing vaguely at the papers. "She says it's too complicated for me to handle alone. She's been so helpful, taking care of the details I can't remember." My heart sank. This wasn't help. This was financial exploitation. Rebecca had found a vulnerable, wealthy woman and was systematically taking control of her assets while isolating her from anyone who might notice what was happening. "Elena," I said gently, "have you had a lawyer look at any changes Rebecca has made to your accounts?" Elena looked confused. "Changes? I'm not sure. There might have been some papers I signed. Rebecca said they were just to make it easier for her to help me pay bills." I felt sick. This was elder abuse, plain and simple, and Rebecca had been using me as a convenient villain to explain away any questions Elena might have about her isolated situation. "Does your daughter know about Rebecca's involvement in your finances?" I asked. "Carmen?" "No, I don't think so. Rebecca said it would just worry her unnecessarily. She said Carmen has her own life to live and shouldn't be burdened with my problems." The manipulation was breathtakingly complete. Rebecca had convinced Elena that her own daughter didn't need to know about her declining health or financial arrangements, while simultaneously convincing Elena that I was a threat to be avoided. She'd created the perfect scenario to isolate Elena from anyone who might protect her. I spent another hour with Elena, listening to her stories about her successful career, her investments, her pride in building financial security for her retirement years. She'd worked hard for her wealth, making smart decisions in the stock market and even early investments in cryptocurrency that had paid off handsomely. Her net worth was in the millions, built through decades of careful planning. And Rebecca was stealing it, piece by piece, under the guise of helping. When I finally left Elena's house, my mind was reeling. I walked the streets of Queens in a daze, trying to process what I'd learned. My daughter-in-law wasn't just cold and manipulative toward me. She was a criminal. She was taking advantage of a vulnerable elderly woman while painting me as the villain to cover her tracks. But what could I do? Who would believe me? Rebecca had spent years building her reputation as the responsible one in the family, while portraying me as needy and dramatic. If I went to Michael with this story, would he believe me, or would he think his mother was finally having some kind of breakdown? That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Elena, alone in that big house, confused and vulnerable, trusting the woman who was robbing her blind. I thought about all the lies Rebecca had told about me, all the times she'd made me feel like I was crazy for wanting a relationship with my own son and granddaughter. By morning, I'd made a decision. I couldn't let this continue. Elena needed protection, and I needed proof of what Rebecca was doing. But I also knew I had to be smart about it. If I confronted Rebecca directly, she'd deny everything, and probably cut off all contact with Elena, making it impossible to help her. I needed evidence, and I knew exactly how to get it. The next day, I went to an electronics store in Manhattan. I'd never been tech-savvy. Robert had always handled anything involving computers or gadgets. But desperation makes you learn quickly. I asked the young clerk to help me find a small recording device, something I could hide easily. "Are you trying to catch a cheating spouse?" he asked with a knowing grin. "Something like that," I replied. He showed me a tiny digital recorder, no bigger than a USB drive, that could record for hours on a single battery charge. It was voice-activated and could be hidden almost anywhere. Perfect for my purposes. I practiced using the device at home until I was confident I could operate it without fumbling. Then I planned my return visit to Elena's house. I called Elena first, saying I'd enjoyed our conversation and wondering if I could visit again. She sounded pleased to hear from me. Probably the first genuine human connection she'd had in months. Of course, Margaret. But Rebecca usually comes by on Thursdays to help with my appointments. Maybe we could visit on Friday instead. Thursday. That gave me the perfect opportunity. On Thursday afternoon, I positioned myself across the street from Elena's house and waited. Sure enough, Rebecca arrived right on schedule, carrying a briefcase and looking very businesslike. She used her own key to enter, which struck me as presumptuous but not necessarily sinister. I waited 20 minutes, then knocked on the door. Rebecca answered, and the expression on her face when she saw me was priceless. Shock, anger, and something that might have been fear flashed across her features in rapid succession. "Margaret," she said, her voice tight, "what are you doing here? I specifically told you not to come to Elena's house." "I know what you told me," I replied calmly. "But Elena and I have become friends. She invited me for tea." I could see Rebecca's mind racing, trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected development. Behind her, I could see Elena sitting at the kitchen table, looking confused by the tension in Rebecca's voice. "This isn't a good time," Rebecca said. "Elena has been having a difficult day. She's very confused." But Elena spoke up from the kitchen. "Nonsense, Rebecca. I'm fine today. Margaret, please come in. I was just telling Rebecca about our lovely conversation yesterday." Rebecca had no choice but to step aside, but I could feel her anger radiating like heat. As I walked past her into the house, I quickly dropped the tiny recording device behind a decorative bowl on the hall table. It was voice-activated, so it would start recording as soon as we began talking. The next hour was perhaps the most uncomfortable of my life. Rebecca tried to dominate the conversation, speaking for Elena whenever possible, redirecting any questions about Elena's finances or living situation. But Elena, despite her moments of confusion, was clearly sharper than Rebecca gave her credit for. At one point, Elena mentioned that she was worried about some bank statements that didn't look right. "You don't need to worry about those," Rebecca said quickly. "Remember? We set up that new system to make everything easier for you. The important thing is that all your bills are being paid." But the amount seems so large," Elena said, "and I don't remember authorizing some of these transfers." Rebecca's laugh sounded forced. "Elena, that's why you asked me to help you. Your memory isn't what it used to be. These are all transactions we discussed and approved together." I watched this exchange with growing disgust. Rebecca was gaslighting Elena, using her memory issues against her to cover up what was clearly financial theft. "Elena," I said carefully, "have you considered having your daughter Carmen review these statements? Just for peace of mind?" Rebecca's eyes flashed dangerously. "That's not necessary. Carmen is very busy with her own life. Besides, I have financial power of attorney now, so everything is being handled properly." Power of attorney. My heart sank. If Rebecca had legal control over Elena's finances, it would be much harder to prove wrongdoing or to get Elena's assets protected. I stayed for another hour, making small talk while the recording device captured every word. Rebecca was clearly eager for me to leave, checking her watch repeatedly and making comments about Elena needing to rest. Finally, I announced that I should go. As I gathered my coat and purse, I made sure to retrieve the recording device from behind the bowl. Neither Rebecca nor Elena noticed. "Margaret," Rebecca said as she walked me to the door, "I hope you understand that Elena needs consistency in her life. Too many visitors can be overwhelming for someone in her condition." "Of course," I said sweetly. "I wouldn't want to do anything that might upset her or interfere with the wonderful care you're providing." My sarcasm was lost on her. Or maybe she was just so focused on getting me out of the house that she missed it. That evening, I listened to the recording on my laptop, another technological challenge I managed to overcome through sheer determination. Most of it was mundane conversation. But there were several damning moments where Rebecca dismissed Elena's concerns about her finances and contradicted Elena's memories of their previous conversations. It wasn't enough for a criminal case, but it was a start, and I had a plan to get more. The next morning, I called Elena and asked if I could visit again the following week. "I'd love that," she said. "Rebecca won't be here Monday afternoon. She has some other commitment." Perfect. On Monday, I arrived at Elena's house with a proposition. I'd done some research over the weekend, looking into elder abuse resources and financial protection services. I had a plan, but I needed Elena's cooperation. "Elena," I said, "I'm going to ask you something difficult, and I need you to really think before you answer. Do you completely trust Rebecca with your money?" Elena was quiet for a long time. "I want to," she said finally. "She's been so helpful. But sometimes I look at my bank statements and I don't understand where all the money went. When I ask questions, she gets impatient with me. She says I'm forgetting our conversations. What if I told you there was a way to get independent answers about your finances? Someone who could review everything without Rebecca knowing?" Elena's eyes brightened. "Would you help me do that?" And so we made a plan. Elena would gather copies of her recent financial statements, the ones Rebecca didn't think she was capable of understanding. I would take them to a financial advisor I'd researched, someone who specialized in helping elderly clients protect their assets. It took Elena several days to collect the documents without arousing Rebecca's suspicion. When she finally handed me a manila folder full of bank statements, investment reports, and legal documents, my hands were shaking. "Promise me something," Elena said. "If Rebecca is really stealing from me, you'll help me stop her. I worked so hard for this money. It was supposed to take care of me and leave something for Carmen." "I promise," I said. The financial advisor I consulted was a woman named Patricia Chen, recommended by the Senior Center in Brooklyn. She specialized in cases of financial elder abuse, and she'd seen situations like Elena's before. Patricia reviewed Elena's documents with professional efficiency, but I could see her expression growing grimmer with each page. "Margaret," she said finally, "this is one of the worst cases I've seen. In the past 18 months, over $400,000 has been transferred out of Elena's investment accounts. The official records show these as authorized transactions for estate management fees and care coordination services, but the amounts are completely unreasonable." She showed me the patterns in the transfers, small amounts at first, then increasingly large sums as Rebecca apparently grew bolder. The most recent transfer had been for $50,000, supposedly for emergency home modifications. "There's also evidence that Elena's stock portfolio has been liquidated without her knowledge," Patricia continued. "She had significant holdings in blue-chip stocks and some cryptocurrency investments that were quite valuable, all sold in the past year, allegedly to simplify her financial situation." The scope of the theft was breathtaking. Rebecca hadn't just been skimming money from Elena's accounts. She'd been systematically liquidating Elena's entire fortune. "What can we do?" I asked. "We need to act quickly," Patricia said. "If this continues at the current rate, Elena will be financially ruined within another year or two. I can help Elena revoke Rebecca's power of attorney and set up proper oversight of her accounts. But Elena will need to be willing to confront Rebecca directly." That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at the financial documents Patricia had copied for me. The evidence was overwhelming, but I knew Rebecca wouldn't go down without a fight. She'd built her entire lifestyle on Elena's stolen money. And she'd been using me as a scapegoat for so long that no one in my family would believe the truth without absolute proof. I needed more than financial records. I needed Rebecca to confess, on recording, to what she'd been doing. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Elena called me on Wednesday, sounding distressed. "Margaret, could you come over? Rebecca is here. And she's asking me to sign some papers. She says they're just updates to my will, but I'm scared. After what we discovered about my money, I don't know what to believe. I'll be right there, I said. I grabbed my small recording device and took the subway to Queens as fast as I could. When I arrived at Elena's house, I could hear voices from inside. Rebecca's voice, sharp and impatient, and Elena's, confused and frightened. I knocked on the door. Rebecca answered, and this time she made no attempt to hide her annoyance. "What do you want, Margaret?" "Elena called me," I said. She sounded upset. "Elena is fine. She's just having difficulty concentrating today. This really isn't a good time for visitors." But I pushed past her into the house. Elena was sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread in front of her, a pen in her shaking hand. "Elena, are you okay?" I asked. "Margaret, thank goodness you're here," Elena said. "Rebecca wants me to sign these papers, but I don't understand what they mean. They talk about transferring assets and changing beneficiaries, and I'm so confused." I looked at the documents. They were complex legal papers that would give Rebecca even more control over Elena's remaining assets. If Elena signed them, Rebecca would essentially own everything Elena had left. "Rebecca," I said, "don't you think Elena should have a lawyer review these documents before signing them?" Rebecca's face flushed red. "Elena doesn't need a lawyer. These are just routine updates. Her previous will was outdated, and these changes will make everything much simpler." "Simpler for whom?" I asked. "For Elena, obviously. Look at her. She can barely remember what day it is. She needs someone responsible to handle her affairs." "Someone like you?" I pressed. "Someone like me," Rebecca confirmed. "I've been taking care of Elena for over a year now. I've sacrificed time with my own family to make sure she's safe and comfortable. The least she can do is show some gratitude." Elena looked stricken. "Gratitude? Rebecca, I've been paying you for your help, haven't I?" Rebecca's laugh was cold. "Elena, you know your memory isn't reliable. We've discussed this many times. You asked me to help you as a favor, as a friend. Any money that's changed hands has been for your own expenses." I felt my tiny recording device in my pocket, and I prayed it was picking up every word of this conversation. "What expenses?" Elena asked, her voice growing stronger. "Margaret helped me review my account statements. There are transfers I don't remember authorizing. Large amounts of money going to accounts I've never seen before." Rebecca's composure was starting to crack. "Elena, you're getting confused again. Margaret has been filling your head with conspiracy theories. She's always been jealous of successful people, always looking for someone to blame for her own problems." "Leave Margaret out of this," Elena said with surprising firmness. "I want to know where my money went." "Your money went to taking care of you," Rebecca snapped. "Do you think managing your life is free? Do you think I enjoy spending my days dealing with your medical appointments and financial paperwork? You're lucky I've been willing to help you at all." The mask was finally slipping. Rebecca's tone had shifted from patronizing patience to open resentment. "Help me?" Elena repeated. "You've been stealing from me." "Stealing?" Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I've been saving you from yourself. You were making terrible financial decisions, trusting the wrong people, getting confused about your own affairs. Without me, you would have lost everything to scammers or made some stupid investment mistake. So you decided to steal it instead." Elena's voice was clearer and more forceful than I'd heard it before. "I didn't steal anything," Rebecca shouted. "I protected your assets by consolidating them under proper management. Everything I did was legal and in your best interest." "Whose best interest?" I interjected. "Because it looks like the only person who's benefited from Elena's protection is you." Rebecca turned on me with fury. "This is all your fault, Margaret. You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? You had to come here and poison Elena against me with your paranoid delusions." "My paranoid delusions about what?" I asked calmly. "About me stealing Elena's money, about me manipulating her, about me being some kind of criminal. You're just upset because Elena and I have a real relationship. unlike the fake drama you try to create with Michael and me. So you haven't been taking money from Elena's accounts? I pressed. Rebecca hesitated, realizing she was backing herself into a corner. Any financial transactions were authorized and necessary for Elena's care. $400,000 for care? I asked. The number hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Her face went white, and I could see her mind racing as she tried to figure out how I could possibly know the specific amount. How do you... She started, then stopped herself. How do I know how much you've stolen? I finished. Because Elena and I had her accounts reviewed by a financial advisor. We know about the unauthorized transfers, the liquidated stock portfolio, the cryptocurrency investments you cashed out without her knowledge. Rebecca's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, and she knew it. But instead of admitting what she'd done, she went on the attack. Elena authorized all of those transactions, she insisted. She might not remember, but she signed all the paperwork. I have documents proving everything was legal. Documents you pressured her to sign when she was confused and vulnerable, I said. Elena isn't a child, Rebecca fired back. She's a competent adult who made her own financial decisions. If she regrets those decisions now, that's not my fault. Elena stood up slowly, her hands braced against the table for support. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. Rebecca, I want you to leave my house. I want you to return my house key, and I don't want you to come back. Rebecca stared at her in shock. Elena, you don't mean that. You're just confused. Margaret has been manipulating you, filling your head with lies. The only lies I've heard have come from you, Elena said. Margaret showed me kindness and respect. You've been treating me like a fool while stealing my life savings. I saved your life savings, Rebecca screamed. Without me, you would have lost everything to your own bad decisions. I deserve compensation for everything I've done for you. Compensation? Elena's voice rose to match Rebecca's volume. You've taken nearly $500,000 from me. How much compensation do you think you deserve? Rebecca seemed to realize that she'd finally said too much. Her face went through a rapid series of expressions: anger, fear, calculation, before settling on cold defiance. Fine, she said. If this is how you want to be, Elena, then good luck managing your life without me. But don't come crying to me when you end up in some nursing home because you can't take care of yourself anymore. She gathered up the unsigned legal documents and stuffed them into her briefcase. And Margaret, she added, turning to face me, stay away from my family. You've caused enough trouble already. Your family, I replied. You mean my son and my granddaughter. The family I've been financially supporting for years while you tell everyone I'm a burden? Rebecca's eyes widened as she realized I knew about that lie too. Michael will never believe you, she said. He trusts me, not you. If you try to turn him against me with these ridiculous accusations, you'll only end up looking like a bitter, delusional old woman. Then I guess we'll see, won't we? I said. Rebecca stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that Elena's china cabinet rattled. In the silence that followed, Elena sank back into her chair, looking exhausted but relieved. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come today. You don't need to thank me, I said. We protected each other. Over the next week, Elena and I worked with Patricia Chen to secure Elena's remaining assets and revoke all of Rebecca's financial authorities. We also filed a report with Adult Protective Services and consulted with a criminal attorney about pursuing charges for elder financial abuse. The process was complicated and emotionally draining, but Elena was determined to see it through. I won't let her get away with this, she said during one of our meetings with the lawyer. And I won't let her do this to someone else. But I knew the hardest part was still ahead of me. I had to tell Michael what his wife had been doing, and I had to do it in a way that he couldn't dismiss or rationalize away. On Sunday evening, I called Michael and asked if I could come over for a family meeting. something important I needed to discuss with him and Rebecca together. "Is everything okay, Mom?" he asked, and I could hear genuine concern in his voice for the first time in months. "Everything will be okay," I said. But there are some things Rebecca and I need to clear up. When I arrived at their house the following evening, the atmosphere was tense but not hostile. Michael seemed genuinely puzzled by the mysterious meeting I'd requested, while Rebecca looked like she was preparing for battle. Emma was at a friend's house for a sleepover, so it was just the three of us in their living room, a room I'd helped furnish with my financial contributions over the years. "So," Michael said after we'd settled on the couch, "what's this about?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment when I either regained my place in this family or lost it forever. "Michael," I said, "I need to tell you some things about Rebecca that you're not going to want to hear. But I need you to listen to the whole story before you make any judgments." Michael glanced at Rebecca, who was sitting rigid beside him. "Mom, if this is about you and Rebecca not getting along, maybe we should talk about family counseling instead of whatever confrontation you're planning." "This isn't about us not getting along," I said. "This is about Rebecca committing criminal elder abuse against a vulnerable woman named Elena Vasquez." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at me like I'd just announced I was an alien, while Rebecca's face had gone completely pale. "What?" Michael said finally. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I pulled out my folder of evidence, the financial documents, the recording transcripts, Patricia Chen's analysis of Elena's stolen assets. I laid it all out on their coffee table. Rebecca has been systematically stealing money from an elderly woman with early-stage dementia, I said. Over the past 18 months, she's taken nearly $500,000 from Elena's accounts. She's also been lying to both of us about each other to keep us from comparing notes about her behavior. Michael looked at the documents, then at Rebecca, then back at me. "This is insane, Mom. Rebecca doesn't even know any elderly woman named Elena." Rebecca finally found her voice. "Michael, your mother has been stalking me, following me around the city, harassing an innocent woman, making up conspiracy theories because she can't accept that we have boundaries in our relationship." "Stalking you?" I repeated. "Is that what you call it when I discovered you were financially abusing Elena?" "I've never done anything wrong," Rebecca insisted. "Elena asked for my help with her finances because she was getting confused and making bad decisions. Everything I did was with her full consent and legal authorization." Michael was looking back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match. "Okay, everybody just calm down. Mom, these are pretty serious accusations. Do you have any actual proof of what you're claiming?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made of Rebecca's confrontation with Elena. Her voice filled the room, clear and damning. "I didn't steal anything. I protected your assets by consolidating them under proper management. Any financial transactions were authorized and necessary for Elena's care." "Elena isn't a child. She's a competent adult who made her own financial decisions." As the recording played, I watched Rebecca's face cycle through panic, rage, and finally resignation. Michael listened in stunned silence, his expression growing more horrified with each damning word. When the recording ended, Michael turned to Rebecca. "Is this real? Did you really take money from some old woman?" Rebecca's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand the situation, Michael. Elena was being taken advantage of by financial advisors and investment criminals. She was confused and making terrible decisions. I was trying to protect her." "By stealing her money?" Michael demanded. "I didn't steal anything," Rebecca screamed. "I was managing her assets responsibly. She would have lost everything without my help." $400,000 in management fees? I asked quietly. Rebecca whirled on me. "You manipulative witch! You planned this whole thing. You've been plotting against me for months, haven't you?" "I've been trying to understand why you treated me like an enemy," I replied. "Now I know it's because you were terrified I'd discover what you were really doing." Michael stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. This is unbelievable. Rebecca, please tell me there's some explanation for this that makes sense. The explanation is that your mother is a bitter, jealous woman who can't stand that I have friends and relationships outside of your family, Rebecca said. She's been obsessed with destroying our marriage ever since Emma was born. Our marriage? Michael repeated. Rebecca, if what Mom is saying is true, you've been stealing from an elderly woman with dementia. That's not about our marriage. That's about you being a criminal. I am not a criminal, Rebecca shrieked. Everything I did was legal. Elena signed every document, authorized every transaction. If she changed her mind later, that's not my fault. I pulled out the unsigned legal documents Rebecca had tried to pressure Elena into signing. Including these? The papers that would have given you complete control over Elena's remaining assets. Michael took the documents and scanned them quickly. Jesus Christ, Rebecca. These would make you the sole beneficiary of this woman's estate. Were you planning Elena's funeral too? Those documents were Elena's idea, Rebecca insisted. She wanted to make sure someone responsible would handle her affairs after she's gone. Someone like you? Michael asked, his voice dripping with disgust. Someone who actually cares about her, unlike her own daughter who never visits, Rebecca shot back. So you decided to steal her inheritance before she dies? I asked. Michael sank back onto the couch, staring at the evidence spread across the coffee table. How long has this been going on? About 18 months, I said. Right around the time you and Rebecca bought this house and started the major renovations. Michael's face went white as he made the connection. The money for the renovations. Rebecca, you said it came from a bonus at work. Rebecca said nothing. How much of Elena's money did you use on our house? Michael demanded. Still nothing. Rebecca, answer me. It wasn't Elena's money, Rebecca said finally. It was money I earned by managing her affairs and taking care of her needs. $40,000 for a kitchen renovation was your fee for managing Elena's affairs? Michael asked incredulously. I worked hard to help Elena, Rebecca said defensively. I deserved compensation for my time and effort. You deserve to go to prison, Michael replied. The room fell silent except for the sound of Rebecca's ragged breathing. She looked like a cornered animal, dangerous and unpredictable. None of this matters anyway, she said finally. It's Elena's word against mine, and she has dementia. No one will believe her over me. They'll believe the financial records, I said, and they'll believe the recordings of you admitting to taking her money. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Those recordings are illegal. You can't record someone without their consent. Actually, I said, in New York State, you only need consent from one party to a conversation. Since I was present during all the conversations I recorded, they're perfectly legal. The look of hatred Rebecca gave me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever seen. If we'd been alone, I think she might have physically attacked me. Instead, she turned to Michael. You have to choose, she said. It's your mother or me. If you believe her lies over your own wife, then we have nothing left to talk about. Michael looked at her in amazement. You're giving me an ultimatum? After everything Mom just showed me, you think you're in a position to make demands? I'm your wife, Rebecca said. I'm the mother of your child. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant everything to me, Michael replied. Right up until I found out you're a thief who's been manipulating my family and stealing from elderly people. Rebecca seemed to realize that her marriage was over. The calculating look came back into her eyes, and I could almost see her planning her next move. Fine, she said. If that's how you want it, Michael, then that's how it'll be. But don't expect this divorce to be easy. I'll fight for every penny, and I'll make sure Emma knows that you chose your bitter mother over her loving mother. You'll make sure Emma knows the truth, Michael said firmly, that her mother is a criminal who stole money from a sick old woman. Elena isn't sick, Rebecca screamed. She's just forgetful sometimes, and I never stole anything from her. She paid me for legitimate services." $500,000 for legitimate services? I asked. Rebecca realized she'd been caught in another contradiction, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her lies. "Elena has more money than she knows what to do with," Rebecca said. "She's a millionaire several times over from her investments in stocks and cryptocurrency. The money she paid me was a tiny fraction of her total net worth." "So, because she's wealthy, it's okay to steal from her?" Michael asked. "I didn't steal from her," Rebecca insisted. "I provided valuable services that she was happy to pay for." "Services like what?" I pressed. "Financial management, medical appointment coordination, household oversight, companionship." Rebecca rattled off. "Elena was lonely and confused. I gave her purpose and structure." "You gave yourself access to her bank accounts," Michael corrected. "She gave me access because she trusted me," Rebecca said, "because I was the only person who actually cared about her welfare." "You cared so much about her welfare that you were trying to get her to sign documents making you her sole heir?" I asked. Rebecca's face flushed red again. "Those documents were a precaution in case something happened to Elena. She wanted to make sure her assets would be handled properly." "Properly by you?" Michael said. "By someone who understood her wishes," Rebecca replied. "Her wishes to give all her money to a woman she met 2 years ago instead of her own daughter?" I asked. Rebecca stood up abruptly. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to this anymore. Michael, you know who I am. You know I'm not capable of the things your mother is accusing me of. If you choose to believe her fantasies over your own wife, then you're not the man I married." She started toward the door, but Michael called after her. "Where are you going?" "Away from this insanity," Rebecca replied. "I'll be at my sister's house. When you come to your senses and realize your mother has been manipulating you, you can call me." "Rebecca," Michael said, "if you leave this house tonight, don't bother coming back. And don't think about taking Emma with you." "I won't let my daughter be raised by a thief." Rebecca spun around to face him. "You can't keep me from my own daughter." "Watch me," Michael said. "The first thing I'm doing tomorrow morning is calling a lawyer and filing for emergency custody. No judge in the world will give custody to a woman who's been stealing from elderly people with dementia." "You can't prove I stole anything," Rebecca said desperately. I held up the folder of evidence. "Actually, we can. Financial records, recorded admissions, witness testimony from Elena. It's all documented." Rebecca stared at the folder like it was a venomous snake. "You've destroyed my life," she said to me. "You destroyed your own life," I replied. "I just made sure Elena didn't lose hers." "Elena doesn't even know what's happening to her," Rebecca said bitterly. "Half the time, she doesn't remember what year it is." "She remembered enough to know you were stealing from her," Michael pointed out. Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, then seemed to realize there was nothing left to say. Without another word, she walked out of the house, leaving Michael and me alone in stunned silence. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Michael sat staring at the evidence I'd spread across his coffee table, occasionally picking up a document and reading it more carefully. I watched him process the reality that his wife was a criminal and his marriage was over. Finally, he looked up at me. "Mom, I'm so sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For not believing you about Rebecca, for shutting you out, for making you feel like you weren't welcome in our family." His voice broke slightly. "She told me you were jealous and demanding, that you were trying to come between us. I thought I was protecting my marriage by keeping some distance from you." "She needed to isolate me," I said gently. "If we'd been close, I might have figured out what she was doing much sooner." "How did you figure it out?" Michael asked. I told him about overhearing Rebecca's conversation at the diner, seeing her with Elena, my growing suspicions about her warnings to stay away from Elena's house. I explained how Elena and I had discovered we were both being manipulated and lied to. I kept thinking there was something wrong with me, Michael said. Rebecca always had explanations for why we couldn't see you more often, why Emma couldn't have sleepovers with you, why you seemed so needy and dramatic. I thought maybe I was just caught in the middle of a personality conflict. She's very good at manipulation, I said. She had Elena convinced that her own daughter didn't care about her. She had me convinced that you and Emma were better off without me. She probably had you convinced that keeping me at a distance was the responsible thing to do. Michael nodded. She said you were getting older and more demanding, that it wasn't healthy for Emma to see you when you were upset or emotional. She made it sound like protecting Emma from an unstable grandmother. The words hurt, but I understood now that they were part of Rebecca's calculated campaign to isolate me from my family. What happens now? I asked. Now I call a lawyer, Michael said. I file for divorce and emergency custody of Emma. I cooperate with whatever criminal investigation they open into Rebecca's theft from Elena. And I try to rebuild the relationship with you that Rebecca spent years destroying. What about Emma? I asked. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her mother is a criminal? Michael rubbed his face with both hands. I don't know. I guess I'll start with the truth, in age-appropriate language. That mommy made some very bad choices and hurt people, and that's why she can't live with us anymore. She's going to be devastated, I said. She's going to be better off without Rebecca's influence, Michael replied firmly. I won't have my daughter growing up thinking it's okay to lie and steal and manipulate people. Over the next few weeks, our family went through a dramatic transformation. Michael filed for divorce the day after our confrontation, citing Rebecca's criminal financial abuse of Elena as grounds. The court granted him temporary sole custody of Emma pending a full investigation. Rebecca fought the divorce and custody arrangement viciously, hiring an expensive lawyer and claiming that Elena's accusations were the result of dementia-related paranoia. She portrayed herself as a victim of a vindictive elderly woman and a manipulative mother-in-law who had conspired to destroy her marriage. But the evidence was overwhelming. Elena's financial records showed clear patterns of unauthorized transfers and asset liquidation. The recorded conversations captured Rebecca admitting to taking Elena's money and trying to pressure her into signing over more assets. Patricia Chen's expert analysis demonstrated that Rebecca's management fees were completely unreasonable and constituted theft. Most damning of all, investigators discovered that Rebecca had been working this same scam on 2 other elderly clients before she met Elena. She'd been systematically targeting wealthy seniors with cognitive issues, gaining their trust, and then slowly stealing their assets while isolating them from family members who might notice. When the full scope of Rebecca's crimes came to light, the district attorney's office filed charges for elder financial abuse, fraud, and larceny. The total amount stolen from all 3 victims was close to $2 million. Elena was initially reluctant to testify against Rebecca, worried about the stress of a trial and concerned about her own memory issues. But when she learned about the other victims, she became determined to see justice done. I won't let her keep doing this to people, Elena told me during one of our weekly visits. She stole my money, but she also stole my dignity and my independence. No one else should have to go through that. The criminal trial was scheduled for the following year, but Rebecca's civil divorce from Michael moved more quickly. With documented evidence of her criminal activity and her pattern of deception, Rebecca had no leverage to fight Michael's demands for sole custody and control of their marital assets. In a desperate attempt to avoid prison time, Rebecca agreed to a plea deal that required her to make full restitution to all her victims and serve 5 years in state prison. She also agreed not to contest Michael's divorce terms in exchange for his support of the reduced sentence. The day Rebecca was sentenced, I sat in the courtroom next to Elena, holding her hand as the judge read the verdict. Rebecca never looked at us, never showed any remorse for what she'd done. Even at the end, she seemed to believe she was the victim of an unfair conspiracy. But her victims finally had justice. Elena got most of her money back, though the emotional trauma of the betrayal took much longer to heal. The other elderly victims, A retired teacher named Frank and a widow named Dorothy also received restitution and began the process of rebuilding their financial security. For me, the most important victory was the rebuilding of my relationship with Michael and Emma. Without Rebecca's constant manipulation and lies, Michael began to see how much damage had been done to our family dynamics. He made a genuine effort to include me in their lives again, inviting me for weekly dinners and asking for my help with Emma's care. Emma was confused and hurt by her mother's disappearance from their daily life, but she adapted more quickly than I'd expected. Children are remarkably resilient, and with consistent love and honest communication, she began to understand that sometimes adults make very bad choices that hurt other people. "Grandma Margaret," she asked me one evening as I was helping her with homework, "is my mommy a bad person?" It was a question I'd been dreading, but also one I'd prepared for. "Your mommy made some very bad choices," I said carefully. "She hurt people who trusted her, and that's why she can't live with us anymore. But making bad choices doesn't mean someone is completely bad. It means they need to learn how to make better choices." "Will she ever come back?" Emma asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "But what I do know is that you have lots of people who love you very much and will always take care of you. Your daddy loves you, and I love you, and that's never going to change no matter what happens." Emma nodded solemnly, then went back to her math problems. Children have an amazing ability to accept difficult truths when they're presented with love and honesty. As winter turned to spring, I found myself experiencing something I hadn't felt in years: genuine happiness. My apartment, once a prison of loneliness and rejection, became a warm space where Emma came for sleepovers and Michael stopped by for coffee and conversation. I started taking art classes at the senior center, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was constantly managing family crises and financial emergencies. My watercolor paintings were terrible, but the process of creating something beautiful brought me joy. Elena and I became genuine friends, bonding over our shared experience of surviving Rebecca's manipulation. She was a fascinating woman with decades of investment wisdom and business experience. Once her confidence returned, she became a mentor to other seniors who were worried about financial scams and elder abuse. "You saved my life," Elena told me one afternoon as we sat in her garden, drinking tea from her elegant china set. "Not just my money, my life. If you hadn't figured out what Rebecca was doing, she would have taken everything I worked for and left me with nothing." "We saved each other," I replied. "You gave me the strength to stand up to her lies and fight for the truth." The most meaningful moment came 6 months after Rebecca's sentencing, when Michael sat me down for a serious conversation about our family's future. "Mom," he said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Over the years, how much money did you give Rebecca and me? Not loans, gifts. Money you never expected to get back." I was reluctant to discuss the exact amounts, but Michael pressed me for details. When I finally tallied up all the contributions I'd made to their down payment, business support, home improvements, and various emergencies, the number was staggering. "Over $200,000, Michael said quietly. "Mom, you gave us more than $200,000 over the past 10 years. "You needed help," I said simply. "That's what family does." "But Rebecca told everyone that you were financially irresponsible and always asking us for money," Michael replied. "She painted you as someone who was bleeding us dry, when the reality was the exact opposite." Michael arranged to repay me from the assets he'd recovered in the divorce settlement. I protested, saying that money given in love didn't need to be repaid, but he insisted. "This isn't just about the money, Mom," he said. "It's about acknowledging what you sacrificed for our family and making sure you're financially secure for the rest of your life." The repayment allowed me to move out of my cramped Brooklyn apartment and into a beautiful senior living community in Queens, just 20 minutes from Michael and Emma's house. My new apartment had a balcony with a view of the city skyline, space for my art supplies, and a guest room where Emma could stay whenever she wanted. More importantly, I had my dignity back. I was no longer the needy, dramatic mother-in-law who had to beg for scraps of attention from her own family. I was Margaret again, a woman with her own interests, her own friends, her own value beyond what I could provide to others. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the New York skyline in shades of gold and purple, I reflected on everything that had happened. The pain Rebecca had caused, to me, to Elena, to Michael, to Emma, was real and lasting. But it had also taught me something valuable about self-worth and boundaries. For too many years, I had accepted being treated poorly because I was afraid of being alone. I had given money I couldn't afford to lose because I thought love could be purchased. I had swallowed my hurt and anger because I believed that keeping the peace was more important than demanding respect. Rebecca's betrayal forced me to confront these patterns and change them. In fighting for Elena's protection, I had learned to fight for my own. In refusing to enable Rebecca's lies any longer, I had found my own voice again. The woman who had once trembled over a cup of coffee in her cramped apartment, afraid to answer her phone because it might be another disappointment, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more confident, surrounded by genuine love and respect. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Emma, calling to tell me about her day at school and ask if she could come over the next weekend to work on a science project. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I'll pick you up after school on Friday, and we'll make it a proper sleepover with popcorn and movies." "Thanks, Grandma Margaret," she said. "I love you." "I love you too, Emma. More than you'll ever know." As I hung up the phone, I smiled at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. Tomorrow, I would have lunch with Elena and visit the art gallery where several of my watercolor paintings were being displayed in the Senior Artists Showcase. This weekend, I would help my granddaughter learn about photosynthesis and listen to her dreams about becoming a veterinarian. These were not the golden years I had imagined when I was younger, but they were mine. Built on truth instead of lies, respect instead of manipulation, genuine love instead of obligation. I thought about Rebecca, probably sitting in her prison cell, still convinced that she was the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. I felt sorry for her, in a way. She had thrown away a family that loved her, destroyed relationships that could have sustained her, chosen greed over integrity. She would serve her time and eventually be released, but the damage she had done to her own life was irreversible. In the end, she had taught me something invaluable, that sometimes walking away from toxic relationships, even family relationships, is the only way to save yourself. That setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for survival. That respect has to be mutual, or it isn't respect at all. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me had silver hair and wrinkles around her eyes, hands marked by decades of work and worry. But there was something different in her expression now, a strength that hadn't been there 2 years ago, a peace that came from knowing her own worth. I thought about all the people who might be listening to this story, recognizing something familiar in my experience. Maybe they were being manipulated by a family member, or exploited financially by someone they trusted, or slowly isolated from people who cared about them. Maybe they were making excuses for someone else's bad behavior because they were afraid of being alone. If that's you, if any of this feels familiar, I want you to know that you don't have to accept being treated poorly by people who claim to love you. Love doesn't demand that you give up your dignity or your financial security. Love doesn't require you to be isolated from other relationships or to keep secrets about how you're being treated. Real love, the kind that lasts and sustains and heals, is based on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. It doesn't ask you to choose between self-respect and family harmony, because true family harmony includes your happiness and security. You have the right to be treated with kindness by the people in your life. You have the right to maintain relationships outside your immediate family. You have the right to control your own finances and make your own decisions about how to spend your money. You have the right to ask questions and demand honest answers. Most importantly, you have the right to walk away from people who consistently hurt you, even if they're family. Blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to abuse or exploit you. Marriage doesn't give anyone the right to isolate you from your support system. No relationship, no matter how important, is worth sacrificing your fundamental dignity and self-worth. It took me 72 years to learn these lessons, but it's never too late to start demanding better treatment from the people in your life. It's never too late to set boundaries, walk away from toxic relationships, or fight back against people who are taking advantage of you. Elena was in her 80s when she found the courage to stand up to Rebecca. She could have spent her remaining years being slowly robbed of everything she'd worked for, living in increasing isolation and confusion while her abuser convinced her that she was imagining the theft. Instead, she chose to fight back, and because of that courage, she got justice and recovered her stolen assets. I could have continued accepting my role as the family scapegoat, sending money while being excluded, swallowing my hurt while being blamed for family problems I didn't cause. Instead, I chose to investigate the truth, and that investigation revealed not only Rebecca's crimes, but also the path to rebuilding authentic relationships with my son and granddaughter. The choice to demand better treatment is always available, no matter how long you've been accepting less than you deserve. The choice to investigate suspicious behavior is always available, no matter how much easier it might be to look the other way. The choice to protect yourself and others from people who are causing harm is always available, no matter how frightening it might feel to stand up to someone who has power over you. If you're in a situation where someone is exploiting you financially, there are resources available to help. Adult Protective Services can investigate elder abuse. Financial advisors who specialize in these situations can help you understand what's happening to your money. Legal aid societies can provide affordable legal assistance for people dealing with financial exploitation. If you're being emotionally manipulated or isolated from other family members, there are counselors and therapists who understand these dynamics and can help you develop strategies for protecting yourself. Senior centers often have support groups for people dealing with difficult family situations. Most importantly, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if someone's explanations don't add up, if you're being pressured to keep secrets or cut ties with people who care about you, those are red flags that deserve investigation. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid or dramatic for asking questions about your own life and relationships. The people who truly love you will want you to feel secure and confident in your relationships with them. They won't be threatened by your questions or your relationships with other people. They won't ask you to sacrifice your financial security or your emotional well-being for their convenience. Anyone who demands that kind of sacrifice, who uses your love as leverage to control or exploit you, is not someone who deserves unlimited access to your life, your resources, or your trust. Have you ever experienced something similar to what Elena and I went through? Have you found yourself questioning whether you're being treated fairly by someone who claims to love you? Have you ever discovered that someone was lying to you about another person's feelings or actions? Please share your story in the comments. Sometimes just telling the truth about what happened to us can help someone else recognize the patterns in their own life. Sometimes knowing that other people have survived similar situations can give someone the courage to take action to protect themselves. And if this story has touched you in any way, if it's made you think about your own relationships, or reminded you of someone you care about who might be in a similar situation, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I have many more stories to tell from the heart, stories about resilience and recovery, and the surprising ways that life can change when we find the courage to demand better treatment from the people around us. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring about Elena's story. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable someone else's bad behavior, even when that someone is family. Remember, you deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. You deserve relationships based on mutual care and honest communication. You deserve to feel safe and valued in your own life. Never let anyone convince you otherwise, no matter who they are or how much history you share with them. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your worth is not up for debate. Your right to be treated well is not dependent on anyone else's approval. Hold on to those truths, no matter what storms you might face. They will carry you through,